However, it's welcome to everybody. I am the Dean for the International Medical University Community Engagement. And being the lead of the community engagement, I will give you a brief introduction on what we do here and what we are, who we are. So the International Medical University is one of Malaysia's foremost private university, and we focus on healthcare programs with a vision to be a global center of excellence in learning, research, and committed to nurturing a community of scholars and professionals to become ethical, caring citizens serving society. So through this office of the University Community Engagement, we aim to drive social change through sustainable transformation, through community engaged participatory research. And we're trying to all the time try to find answers to some of society's challenges. And being a university, it is our responsibility to nurture the next generation of people who would be serving society. So through this office, our initiatives are generally anchored on 3 or 4 United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals, namely UNSDG 3 for good health and well-being, 4 for education, 10 for reducing inequalities, and 12 for responsible consumption and production. So, empowering the disabled is one of these areas within the UN SDG 3. And we feel this is a very important area to champion. We aim to improve the lives of the disabled community, their well-being, reducing inequality, giving better access to them, and also, most importantly, empowering these communities. So this can only be achieved when people like you work together, participants like you who come together, who want to know, to be educated, and want to be aware of what's going on, and perhaps and also be part of this great initiative that we are all doing across the globe. We have a panel of speakers today who will share with you their expertise. They too have taken on to be part of this initiative. We will hear more from them later. So with collaboration from partners like LDSC, the Latter-day Saints Charities, of whom here Mr. and Mrs. Garys will be introduced later. We have also the University Malaya and also a number of community partners. So together we hope to be able to drive change in this area. And for that, I'm introducing to you today the first of our series of webinars in community engagement. So stay tuned for more of that. We also have a wonderful team of dedicated people within the university who are not on the panel today. They are our physiotherapists, our chiropractors, our medical and also healthcare professionals. So together as a team, we are moving in one direction and hoping to make a difference for the communities. So I hope you enjoyed this session and perhaps change your mind and join us in this great initiative. I'm going to pass the mic over to Hanis, who is also our project leaders for this wheelchair provision collaboration that we have. And she's going to talk more about it later. She's also going to be the moderator for this session. Over to you, Hanis.
Thank you, Professor Kung, for the introductions and your lovely speech. I'm Nurhanis Ramzi, lecturer and research fellow from Institute of Research, Development and Innovation, IMU. These webinar sessions will start off with short introductions from our respected panels from 4 different organizations. Associate Professor Arshad from IMU, Associate Professor Julia from University Malaya UMMC, Mr. Sinisha from Medical University of Vienna, Austria, and last but not least, Mr. and Mrs. Gary from LDSC. Each of them will be given a 10 minutes to talk on various aspects and efforts of physical disability community empowerment through appropriate wheelchair provisioning system. If audience have any questions during the panel talk, Please feel free to post your question in the chat box, and selected question will be answered during Q&A session after all the panelists have given their talk. Lastly, we will end our webinar session with short clip to launch our IMU LDSC initiative for wheelchair provisioning system. We hope you can stay tuned until the end. So Professor Ashad will give us 1 minute, tell us about yourself, followed by Professor Julia, Mr. Sinisha, and also Mr. and Mrs. Gary.
Okay, thank you, Anis. My name is Muhammad Arshad Ikram. I'm a consultant orthopedic surgeon and associate professor at International Medical University in Malaysia. Today, I'm going to share my experience as an orthopedic surgeon, how we can empower the people with disability to create a better society. So this is today. That's my talk. So I will share my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Mr. Sinisha, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Sinisha and I'm an occupational therapist. I studied occupational therapy in Croatia and I worked there as a community therapist for people who had physical disabilities. In 2011, I moved to Qatar, where I worked for many years as an occupational therapist in neurological rehabilitation and the sitting and positioning clinic, which is also called wheelchair clinic. I have finished a specialist course in the UK for patients with complex disabilities and also master study in occupational therapy in Sweden. And now I'm pursuing a PhD at the Medical University of Vienna. I'm actively involved in the wheelchair community also, and I'm going to present a study that we did in Croatia. Thank you.
Just for you all informations, Mr. Sinisa is our collaborators for wheelchair project with our next panel, Professor Julia from University Malaya Medical Center. Prof. Julia?
So, yeah, okay, thank you, Anis. So, good afternoon, everybody. So, I am Julia Petra Enkasan. I'm from the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine, University Malaya Medical Center. So, by profession, I am a rehabilitation physician and I work mainly with people with spinal cord injuries. So, a lot of them are wheelchair users. What I'm going to do today is to share what UMMC initiated, UM and UMMC initiative to empower people with disability, because we truly believe that everybody play a role to create a better society for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Julia. So last but not least, our lovely partner, Mr. and Mrs. Gary, Wendy and Craig. They are from LDSC. They are at night time right now in the USA. So Gary, please tell us about yourself.
Well, I am Wendy Gary and this is my husband, Craig Gary. We live in the United States in the state of Oregon. We are volunteers in the Latter-day Saint Charities program assigned to the Wheelchair Initiative. We are wheelchair specialists, and our area of assignment is Southeast Asia. So we work in the countries of Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Craig supports the technical and governmental aspects of our program. And I, on the other hand, are the clinical face of the program. I've been a physical therapist for about 40 years, which is probably longer than most of you have been alive. And I've spent years and years in the clinic as well as an administrator to 2 large rehab hospitals in Los Angeles. In our experience in Southeast Asia and the disabled in each of those countries, you can't work there without developing an even deeper passion for being involved in a wheelchair provisioning program. We're grateful for our assignment and see us involved in this many years to come. Thank you for inviting us to be here. We're excited to participate.
Thank you, Wendy. So over to you, Professor Ashad. You will share with us as orthopedic surgeons seeing amputation due to various diseases and how appropriate wheelchair play an important part in physical disabled community. So,
sure. So yeah, I will share my screen. Okay, thank you very much. So empowering people with disability, creating a better society. So hello from Malaysia, because our speakers, we are in 3 time zones. So good morning to Sinisha, good evening to Mr. and Mrs. Gary's, another part of the world, good afternoon. So this is International Medical University, our campus in Malaysia. It's empowering people with disability, creating a better society. So according to WHO, 80% of people with disabilities in the world live in low socio-economic countries. Asia and Pacific is home to an estimated 690 million people with disability. An estimated 1% of the world's population, or just over 65 million, need a wheelchair. So now we have to see what is disability. So according to World Health Organization, a disability has 3 elements. Number 1 is impairment. Impairment in a person, body structure or function, or mental functioning. Example impairments include loss of limb, loss of vision, or memory. The second element is limitation of activity, such as difficulty seeing, hearing, walking, or problem solving. The third element of disability is restriction in the participation in social activities, like recreational activities, working, daily activities. So that's the definition of disability according to World Health Organization. So let's see how we can empower people with disability. So disability, we have to remove the dis to make the person able. So first of all is a comprehensive assessment to create goals that are appropriate and attainable. We have to remove the barriers which prevent the goals to achieve goals. So we have to remove the barriers, and then we have to ensure that these people, they participate in all spheres of society. So let's see what's our role as an orthopedic surgeon. How can we help these people? So the first thing is the people with disabilities due to deformities. We store anatomy. So the structure of the body, we maintain their alignment to restore anatomy so they can function as early as possible. So this is our job as orthopedic surgeon, to bring them back to align the normal anatomy, and then we can bring them back to create a better society. The other roles, the children born with the deformities. This is, you see that these are the club foot. The club feet operated and then become straight, and now the child is wearing shoes. The other one, very common problem, the osteoarthritis in the old age, the knee problem. You give, so see the disability of this person, severe deformity. You make put a new knee, and the knee becomes straight. So now lower limb amputation. So lower limb amputation is a nightmare for the patient. The biggest challenge for orthopedic surgeon is to break the news that you are going to have the amputation. And this becoming common due to the multiple reasons you can see in the list. The war zones, the trauma, motor vehicle accident, car accidents, train, nowadays aeroplane. So these are the natural disasters. So these are the common causes which leads to lower limb amputation. The problem arises frequently in elective amputation like diabetes. It's so difficult to convince the patient that we have to remove either toe or some part of your body. So losing a part of body is the biggest nightmare. Now these people, to convince orthopedic surgeon to convince go for amputation is the biggest challenge. There are stages of denial, anger, bargain. Would you believe they bargain? Please, doctor, just remove one toe. Why you want to remove the whole my leg? Just try with one toe or two toe. Maybe I will get better. And then they'll go into depression and finally acceptance. In fact, orthopedic surgeon is helping them to bring back to the society. Otherwise, due to these diabetic foot ulcers, they are away from the society. They confine them to a home. So that's why one of our job is to bring them back to society. So it's a life-changing physical, social, psychological effect on the patient and their family. Limb amputation. So these patients have their perception is the biggest perception is the mobility. How can I move? Even removing the one toe, the biggest challenge they think in their term, in their perception, is the mobility. Doctor, how will I move? And it's a correct saying, movement is life. So you have to come up with the thing that forget the meaning of can't. I can do it. So rehabilitation play a big role, and the new appliances like orthosis, artificial limbs, the modern wheelchairs. Look, then they again become the part of the healthy society. This is the big role of the rehabilitation here. But when you prescribe a wheelchair, before you that someone has to take a seat, please. Then you can decide or judge about the wheelchair. And in fact, as a part of the project of IMU, we took a seat. Look, these are a part of our members. We took a seat, and there's a workshop. Mr. and Mr. Gary, they are the later speakers today. They organized a workshop, and we participated in this workshop. So we took a seat. So wheelchair should not be a symbol of disability. It is a vehicle of liberation and a chariot for independence. History, a very interesting history and development of wheelchair. When there was no wheel, the person with disability you can see in this photograph just dragging along. There was no wheel. This was the biggest invention in the history, is a wheel. After wheel, as a wheelbarrow they are carrying. And this was not until Egyptian time that they invented the chair. They put a wheel and they use as a wheelchair for the elite class. And this is a timeline of the wheelchair, right from the 1550 to modern time, the smart wheelchair, all this chair. But the important thing is proper wheelchair, because the other speaker will speak on the proper wheelchairs. But I just, as an orthopedic surgeon, I want to see if your chair is not good, look at the problems. What problem you can get it? The pressure source in the greater trochanter, in the heels, in the back, the suit too wide, then again you can get the spinal deformities. So wheelchair should not be given by it should be properly provided by the service provider who prescribe wheelchair by 3 elements: assessment, training, and fitting. How others see you is not important. How you see yourself means everything. So the challenges are what makes life interesting, and overcoming them is what makes life meaningful. It will take a road to empower people with disability to create a better society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ashad, for an interesting and powerful note on mobility significance to the physical disabled community. So I forgot to mention during introduction to Gary's. So we've been in training with Craig and Wendy earlier this year before the COVID-19 outbreak. So we managed to get together and be trained by Gary's. So our next speaker is Mr. Sinisha from Vienna, Austria, and he will share with us his research on wheelchair user satisfaction with the prescribed wheelchairs and wheelchair services in Croatia. Over to you, Mr. Sinisha.
Thank you. Just a second, let me share the screen. So hello, everyone. I'm going to present a study that we did in Croatia, where we wanted to see if wheelchair users were happy with their own wheelchairs and wheelchair services, and how well do they function in their own local communities. So for those who don't know where is Croatia, Croatia is this lovely country located on the coast of the Adriatic Sea, just opposite Italy. And so why we actually did this research? It's well known that wrongly done wheelchair assessment incomplete wheelchair assessment leads to inaccurate wheelchair prescription. And the outcome of that is always an unsuitable wheelchair for the user, which results in many complications and problems in the participation of everyday living. An unsuitable wheelchair for the user requires re-evaluation, which of course increases costs for the user, caregivers, community, and the whole healthcare system. The study was done in cooperation with Croatian Paraplegic and Tetraplegic Association, where we wanted to test the satisfaction levels to the current wheelchair and wheelchair services, and to see if there are any relationships between their satisfaction levels and participation in everyday life. 104 participants were included in the study, and a special design questionnaire was given to the patients. So contained of 3 parts. In the first part, we asked questions about satisfaction with wheelchair services and wheelchair characteristics. In the second part, we asked questions about what activities of everyday life wheelchair users perform independently or have problems with. And in the third part, we asked social demographic questions. So majority of our study population were men, almost 70%. The mean age was 43 years old. Most of us, almost 90% of our patients had spinal cord injury as the primary cause of disability. Almost 40% live in Zagreb, the capital city of Croatia, and a little bit more than 50% live in an apartment and live with a spouse or partner. Half of our study population live for 9 or more years with disability. More than 80% are using manual wheelchairs, and the majority, 70% of our study population, are using wheelchairs for 5 or more years. Most of our study population also spend 9 to 12 hours in a wheelchair per day, 36% of those. Some participants also showed what were the reasons for not feeling safe in using a wheelchair. And top 5 reasons were not adjusted or missing wheelchair accessory, the wheelchair was heavy, the upholstery was slippery, they were sliding down in a wheelchair, or dimensions of wheelchair were not individually fitted to the user. One of the major problems in our study is that the clinical wheelchair assessment was done with just a little bit more than 50% of study population, which is against all international clinical guidelines, which clearly state that wheelchair should never be given to the wheelchair user without including that user in the wheelchair assessment. Wheelchair assessment was done by medical professionals and non-medical professionals, and those who were assessed by wheelchair suppliers and vendors said they felt safer in using their wheelchairs after they did the assessment. Another obstacle in our study is that only a little bit more than 60% of study population were involved in the wheelchair selection process, which is, again, not good, because every wheelchair user must be involved in the wheelchair selection process. And those who were involved were more satisfied after wheelchair delivery with all wheelchair characteristics, but that is to be expected, because when the wheelchair user wishes are taken into consideration, then the satisfaction levels should be there and increase. What does trial equipment mean? Trial equipment means borrowing a wheelchair to the user and allowing them to do normal, regular, everyday activities. However, this is another issue in our study, because less than 30% had a chance to try the equipment before it was delivered to them. After the wheelchair assessment is done, users should be involved in the wheelchair selection process at trial equipment, and the literature strongly suggests trying the proposed equipment whenever possible, whether at initial assessment or subsequent visits. Wheelchair education and skills training was done with just a little bit more than 40% of the study population, which is another problem, because the clients should always be trained in the wheelchair use, and in order to increase safety, wheelchair skills training should be done and reviewed in the user's environment regularly. Less than 50 minutes were spent usually on wheelchair education and skills training. Majority felt safer who received, and in only 40% of population, education was done in the participant's home, which is a problem because it should be almost always done in the patient's participant's dwellings. Fitting process is another issue in our study, because a little bit, almost 60% were not fitted for the wheelchair use, which is a big problem. Best international practice guidelines clearly state that wheelchair fitting should be done by competent, skilled wheelchair assessor whenever needed, especially when the new wheelchair is being delivered for the first time. Follow-ups is a big problem also, because more than 90% of our study population were not followed up regarding their wheelchair use, safety, and maintenance. According to international guidelines, first follow-up should be done within first 3 months after wheelchair delivery, and clinical reviews should be done ideally every 6 to 12 months. Medical professionals mostly did the follow-ups. Installation of the ramp was the most common home modification done. It was mostly done in other cities, towns, and villages, which is to be expected because it's very likely that wheelchair users in smaller cities or villages have much supportive local communities that is, they help each other more frequently or get help from authorities. Those who receive home modifications felt safer using wheelchairs indoor, and those who did not receive reported challenges due to existing stairs, inappropriate ramp, and leveled ground floor. Majority of our study population was satisfied with all wheelchair characteristics listed here. However, those who were using wheelchairs for more than 5 years were more satisfied with the comfort of the wheelchairs than those who were using it for less than 5 years. This can possibly be explained in 2 ways. First is that for almost 50% of the study population, wheelchair was given randomly without including wheelchair users in the assessment, which leads to the process of accommodation, where the body itself, if not properly positioned in the right wheelchair, can easily adapt to the new structural environment and cause problems. Those who were satisfied with wheelchair comfort performed more activities of everyday living, such as transfers, food preparation. They had more time. They were doing household chores. However, those who were not happy didn't do important activities such as going to work, doing volunteering activities, attending school or college, or taking care of a pet. In the local community, majority knew where they could ask for new wheelchair and wheelchair repairs. However, also majority didn't know where they could ask for second opinions and seek wheelchair support groups. And this is wrong because all wheelchair services should be known to wheelchair users, and every wheelchair user should have an access to it. So what does empowering mean? Empowering, it's all about inclusion, being included in the local issues and services. It's about making decision makers understand their needs and allow them to function normally in everyday life. It's doing workshops, it's talking to stakeholders, giving lectures to healthcare professionals, support groups, finding a job, and in general, being actively involved in the wheelchair community. Also, there is a difference between equality, equity, and justice. Equality is the assumption that everyone benefits from the same support, which is wrong because we all have different needs. Equity is that everyone gets the support they need, thus producing equity. However, we should all be aiming for justice, which is removing the obstacles, the systemic barrier is in this case fence, so everyone can actually, without problems, see the game. I just want to finish this presentation with this phrase. The most dangerous phrase in the language is "we have always done it this way," and this is, in my opinion, absolutely true. We must always think forward, reflect on previous actions, but think forward. The same old thinking leads to the same old results, and this is absolutely correct. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinisha, for your great research talk. For your audience information, Mr. Sinisha and his team constructed the questionnaire by themselves in order to answer those research questions for the physical disabled community. So let's hear from our next wheelchair research project collaborator, Associate Professor Julia Patrick from Rehab Unit, University Malaya Medical Center, UMMC, on their initiative to empower people with disability.
All right, so thank you, Hanif. I shall share my slide. All right, so good afternoon all. So today I'm going to share what we have done to empower people with disability. So this is the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine. We are in South Tower or Menara Selatan, is how we call it in Malay. And we occupied a few floors in this building. Okay, and just to show you that the department is multidisciplinary. So we have the doctors, we have the occupational therapists, we have the physiotherapists, speech therapists, and also we have technology and wheelchair. We also have division of P&O, prosthetic and orthotic, but this is being vended out. Yeah? So we don't we provide a venue for vendors to do the service. So it is a multidisciplinary group, the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine. And just to show you, this is not the most updated photo, but just to show you that if you see my head is going that way because my webcam is here, but my slide is here. All right. So we are a big family, right? Just to show you that we are a big family. And okay, so on to the topic that I would like to share. I'm going to talk through all these initiative that we have done to empower people with disabilities. So let's start with wheelchair service professional. All right, so as Department of Rehabilitation Medicine, we working with people with disability is not new to us. All right, so I work with people with spinal cord injury, for which most of them are paralyzed and are wheelchair users. So with regards to UMMC, we have division of occupational therapists, and all the autists are trained to prescribe basic wheelchair, at least in terms of knowing whether the seat is big enough, whether the height from the knee to the foot plate is okay, and whether this is meant for active wheeling or going to be pushed by others. All of them are trained to prescribe this wheelchair. However, when it comes a bit more complicated, it goes to the division of rehab technology and wheelchair services. So which we call as wheelchair service professional. Okay. So what wheelchair service professional does is they do wheelchair modification and postural support devices, which I will show later. We also do wheelchair repair maintenance for both the hospital as well as the clients or patient. We do training for both the healthcare providers as well as for the PWDs and their family. All right, so this is the view of the workshop that we have, located in the ground floor of the building. So we have a mixture of therapists, the medical technician as well as an assistant engineer. All right, so this is what I meant by wheelchair modification and postural support device. So, sometimes, special children, mainly special children, they have the body structure might not be might not conform to the usual shape of the wheelchair. So you need some form of support to make sure that they can sit comfortably in the wheelchair. So this is what we call as postural support devices, and then we do wheelchair modification to make sure that they can sit with ease. For example, if you don't put the support here, the leg will be dangling and it can be painful, it can give rise to pressure sore. So this is what we meant by wheelchair modification. So when it comes to complicated cases like this, you need to assess patient differently. Yeah, so they do assessment. So you can see the same here, and they have to make their own things. They will sew their own posture, make and sew their own fabric. Okay, since this is the number of patients seen by the clinic, so it is increasing by the years. They also do wheelchair maintenance for the hospital. We maintain all the wheelchairs in the hospital to make sure that it is safe for the clients to use, as well as we do maintenance or we repair wheelchair for the patient as well. Right? And we do, because the wheelchair service professional, we have a trainer who will able to conduct workshop for healthcare provider. So we do run wheelchair workshop for healthcare provider. We're supposed to have one this year, but because of COVID, we have to cancel it. And we have 3 levels, which is the basic, intermediate, and advanced. Yeah, and there is a hands-on workshop where people are taught how to assess as well as how to do the modification and postural support devices. We also do wheelchair users training for the users, yeah, for the users, wheelchair users. Yeah. So this is a grant led by, a project led by Prof. Nazira and supported by UMKS grant. So where we teach the wheelchair users advanced wheelchair skill. Because outside there, not every environment is accessible, but they need to learn. Just like us, when we fall down, we need to get up. The same with wheelchair users as well. So they teach how to maneuver ramp, obstacles, as well as how to fall down safely. And what's special about this workshop is that we train them to become trainer. So they conduct similar workshop in their places as well. And for far as I know that there is a similar workshop in Kelantan and Terengganu as well. So those are done by wheelchair users. We are not involved. So that is what I mean. What I think is empowerment, empowered to move on their own. And I am a firm believer of peer support. Okay, I believe that nobody, can relate better to the person than the person who have been in the same places as them. So I'm going to talk a bit on peer support. All right, so also this is a project led by me, also supported by UMCAS. So like I said earlier, I work with spinal cord injury. So I feel that there's a gap between hospital and between what happened in the community. So I need the peer support to be strong. So what I did, we brought these are the 3 speakers from abroad, from India and from US, to meet our consumers and show them, guide them what peer support is all about, how to run a successful peer support program. And then at the end of the workshop, we actually did a brainstorming on how we move forward, right? So we even write this in the UN book, and actually written, this is what I like to highlight, written with the consumer itself. This is Peter Tan and also our ex-senator Batmawati. So we wrote about peer support and empowerment. And 2 years later, this was in 2010 when this peer support group was born, right? So because I believe, and when they are born, they are actually really moving forward on their own. Now at this moment we are taking a back seat. They create the program, we support them from the background. So they visited our patient in the ward, when this is pre-COVID time, to give support to them, right? And then they run webinars. They celebrated Fun Will World SCI Day. So they initiated We Just Support. So that is what I'm happy about, because they are empowered to move on their own. We do peer support, always do peer support in the ward, as well as this is done overnight somewhere, right? For them to support themselves. And
Julia, sorry, I have to cut you a little bit because we're running out of time. Maybe we can continue during Q&A session.
All right, okay, sure.
Okay,
Right.
Julia.
Thank you.
Okay, we've heard from orthopedic surgeons, occupational therapists, and rehab specialists' point of view on empowering community with physical disabilities. Now let's hear from our last panel, Mr. and Mrs. Gary, Craig and Wendy, who have been involved for decades in providing wheelchairs all over the world. They are wheelchair specialists and they will be sharing their global reach in wheelchair provisioning system. Over to you now, Craig and Wendy.
Well, thank you, Hannes. Wendy will get the screen up.
There we go.
Very good. Well, again, thank you, and it's great to be part of this webinar today. I'm going to give a little bit of background on Latter-day Saint Charities, and then Wendy will be speaking on effective wheelchair delivery. Latter-day Saint Charities has 8 core initiatives, all for humanitarian causes, and those are all funded by the members of our organization. Wendy and I, as she had mentioned, serve as wheelchair specialists. All the work that we do is in conjunction with the World Health Organization standards and their guidelines for provisioning of wheelchairs. And we do this in a collaboration with local in-country partners. In this example, our work with IMU, which is a wonderful partner for Latter-day Saint Charities. Latter-day Saint Charities has an outreach network that is, since 2001, has reached 134 countries and territories around the world. The goal of this is to not just provide wheelchairs, but provide education and sound knowledge such that our users can conform and learn how to most safely use wheelchairs, and Wendy will be speaking on that. As an example, in 2019, we provided over 52,381 wheelchairs, and again, that's without any cost to the recipient. These are all funded and provided without cost. Latter-day Saint Training Initiative has 2 core purposes. Our mission is such that we want to empower the disabled through this mobility. This young man here is a great example of that. Through the access of mobility, he's now running a small school in Cambodia. Also, we want to provide partner support. So like for IMU and Rotary International and Tesputra Perkum at this time, providing training, wheelchair funding, and support follow-up to help them have an effective wheelchair program. Our work in Malaysia since 2004 has consisted of over 7,000 wheelchairs and 470 walking aids provided. Again, we have many strong partner relationships that we work to develop. The key to our success has been those individual partners that we've been able to develop. We're thankful for IMU for this opportunity. Wendy is now going to speak a little bit on effective wheelchair delivery.
In our view, an effective and quality wheelchair delivery system incorporates 4 key components. First is an appreciation for and adherence to providing the most appropriate wheelchair. Second, completing an individualized client assessment, which leads to an individualized prescription for the most appropriate wheelchair. A third concept includes fitting and training when the person first receives their wheelchair, so they leave knowing how to move in the wheelchair and how to keep the chair in good repair. And finally, we believe any quality program needs to have long-term follow-up and ongoing support for these new wheelchair recipients. And this includes developing service centers so that for many years following the gift of a wheelchair, they can keep that chair rolling. Let's talk about each one of those concepts in a little bit more detail. What is an appropriate wheelchair? Well, an appropriate wheelchair obviously fits that person very well, providing the correct support and being comfortable, but it's more than that. That wheelchair has to be appropriate for the environmental conditions, whether it's a dusty road or it's a city sidewalk or street. It has to be safe and durable, and it needs to be obtained and be able to be maintained in country at an affordable cost. No wheelchair can fit all the needs of all the patients. And so a good quality wheelchair delivery system has access to a number of types of wheelchairs and sizes of wheelchairs. And then on top of that, these wheelchairs should have the ability to be further customized to make it fit and perform exactly as the patient needs. That's the appropriate wheelchair. Concept number 2, an individualized assessment. We've talked a lot about, the other speakers have talked about the necessity of a good assessment. And of course, that begins with trained assessors and usually 1 or 2 assistants to be there for the assessment. Assessments can be performed in a clinic. That's kind of an ideal situation where a client can come into a clinic that's well situated with all the resources right there. However, our experience in Southeast Asia and truly in all other parts of the world, that ideal situation is not possible. And so assessors need to be trained and comfortable with going to the patient, which may mean traveling out to the communities and into patients' homes, because our experience says that somewhere between 60 and 80% of patients don't have the ability, the transportation, or the finance to travel into. And remote assessments need to always be considered. We've talked a lot about assessments, and here is a copy of the assessment form that we use. The print is so small that I took the categories and I've listed them for you on this screen. A lot of data is taken in that initial assessment, but I want to concentrate on just 2 areas. The first is observation. A good assessor will use the skills of observation to anticipate needs, to identify problems, and to move the conversation forward further. As an assessor gets more experienced, of course, those skills of observation improve. Let's go down to pressure source. A couple people have mentioned pressure source, and here's why. If a patient develops a pressure sore, that may dictate them being out of a wheelchair for up to a year while that pressure sore heals. And so it is imperative that they are trained to prevent pressure sores and that we provide wheelchairs that protect the health of the skin and the patients in general. The assessment is compiled into a prescription that's specific and designates what would be the most appropriate wheelchair for that person. Second concept, still on assessment. After the prescription is completed, the product is prepared by a technician. It includes assembly, modifications, maybe even customization of the wheelchair to make it truly fit the patient. Third concept, fitting and user training. As the research showed in the presentation a few moments ago, this ability to stay with the patient when they first get their wheelchair and make a final check to fitting is critical to the outcome, the success of the patient. Not only that, taking this opportunity to train them in how to fully use, maximize the new mobility they've been given. We also provide a user manual and go through it every page, which outlines mobility skills as well as how they can maintain their own wheelchair and weekly and monthly checks, and what to do when the problems are further than what they can do at home. And the final concept, this long-term follow-up and ability to go to a service center. These follow-up appointments are an excellent time for us to be able to see if further services are needed to support the patient, to see problems solved with them. The ability to send them to a service center to replace that caster that's gone bad is such a benefit to patients. And so we encourage all of our partners to invest in repair services. Now, in summary, Craig and I are there through all steps of the assessment and delivery of wheelchairs, but I have to say that some of the most joyous experiences occur right here on this final end, a year later, when we get to see patients in their communities, in their chairs. And I have to tell you, there's nothing like seeing the power of mobility in people's lives. They connect in their community, they have purpose, they have joy in the relationships they are able to develop now that mobility is part of their life. So we're grateful for our opportunity to serve Malaysia as well as 137 other countries through the gift of a wheelchair and the important aspect of training and education in the use of the wheelchair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy and Craig. So it's now time for Q&A sessions. So we have a question from Prof. Julia. For Prof. Julia, you said that you believe in peer support role in supporting physical disabled community. So what do you think? Is it improving their quality of life with the provision of wheelchair, or improve their mobility, or both? Peer support and increase their mobility. Will you care to elaborate on that? Yeah.
Right. Okay. So wheelchair address mobility, peer support does not address mobility. So these two things address different things. So they are really not in isolation. So even you have good peer support, you are stuck because you don't have wheelchair, it will not do you good. You have a good wheelchair, but then you feel very sad, you don't know what is out there for you, also you won't progress very well. So when it comes to disability, it is very complex. There is more to just one thing that can improve your quality of life, you know. There's a lot of things that can just turn you around, and you know, even though you have all the other things, you miss one thing, you may still have not good quality of life. So I would say both is important. If you ask me to choose one, I can't really say which one. Thank you.
Okay, so we got question to Gary's. The audience said, may I know what type of wheelchair do you provide for the patients? Do you provide customized wheelchair or standard wheelchair? And which part of Malaysia do you supply a wheelchair?
Oh, I can answer that. LDSC manufactures 3 different types of wheelchairs. They have the standard wheelchair, which is still probably the most commonly utilized wheelchair, though we wish it was not, because we like to see people more in the active and all-terrain wheelchairs. Active and all-terrain wheelchairs get increased mobility and greater inclusion in society and independence. However, most users initially have a mindset they need a standard wheelchair. We also have trikes. Trikes have been proven to be a great and effective way when people have long distance transportation needs to be able to get across town in a very safe environment. So in addition to the active, standard, and all-terrain wheelchairs, we provide trikes. Now, customization. Our chairs are developed such that they can be customized both in width, height, and angle of backs, but they're not an axle position, but they're not fully customizable like when you see someone re-welding the frame, because we try to maximize the number of recipients that we can reach out to in the most effective and cost-effective way to do it. Where UMMC has a wonderful clinic. We have the opportunity to visit there. They do a great job of personalization and customization one-on-one.
Recently, LDSC began developing a tilt and space wheelchair for pediatric use. And we're so grateful for this development because we've found in Southeast Asia, particularly Cambodia, pediatric need is great. And so we're very excited to be able to begin offering a wheelchair that's particularly suited for the very involved pediatric patients.
And the final part of your question was, where are we currently serving? Right now, our focus is in Kuala Lumpur. And we're thankful for the partners we have there. Since 2004, we've served in East Malaysia and West Malaysia, from Sarawak to Kota Kinabalu, throughout the area of East Malaysia and West Malaysia. And that was with our partners of Rotary International and Cheshire Homes that had a broad outreach network. We're looking for IMU to expand our opportunities.
Yeah. Please be free to contact IMU Cares if you need a wheelchair. So we have a next question to Professor Arshad. In what situation would a physician make a decision to amputate, and what are the key factors involved in that decision?
Okay. The common causes for the lower limb amputation, apart from which I show the peripheral vascular disease, in which the physicians are involved. Because here the physician guides the surgeon for the treatment. The diabetic foot ulcer is the reverse. So what is a teamwork? So is a teamwork, the physician is dealing with the peripheral vascular disease, and then when they do the investigation, the key factor is the symptoms. If the patient is symptomatic and investigation suggested severe vascular disease, and there's no way that you can control by any medications, then you have to go for amputation. So the key factor is like an angiogram. Angiogram will show the vascularity of the limb, and that will guide you to the level of the amputation. So is a teamwork. You have to collaborate with the surgeon. The surgeon is doing the job, but of course taking the guidance for the decision also from the physician. So in the peripheral vascular disease, yes.
Thank you, Professor Arshad. So now to Sinisha. How big of a role cultural role play in wheelchair provisions, and what are the differences between countries in your experience?
Hello. Yes.
Yeah.
So from my experience, it's not only about culture. Usually, it's still that the wheelchair has negative perception, and it's a negative connotation for the wheelchair users and for the community. It's in many countries still like that. However, working in Qatar, we had to deal with lots of sand, and in terms of, it was more geographically related to the wheelchair provision. So the wheelchair had to have bigger tires. So it was more modified for wheelchair users who would want to go outside on the sand or to the beach. So it was more like that than, for example, what we provided for many people in Croatia or here in Austria. So yeah, so the culture from my experience, is usually it plays a big role. However, I have one experience in terms of wheelchair modifications in terms of geography.
Thank you, Sinisha. So I have questions to anyone. What is your impactful stories to share with us? What makes you interested and passionate in supporting the physical disabled community? Anyone care to share?
Mrs. Gary's, Mr. and Mrs. Gary's, they have an interesting experience in different part of the world. Let's listen from them.
Thank you. Yes, we had the wonderful experience of meeting the gentleman that was in one of the photographs. He was sitting in a wheelchair alongside a classroom of children. That gentleman was isolated in his home with his mother with no means of mobility until until they contacted our partner in, I believe it was Cambodia, and they went out to his home to do an assessment. They delivered to him a wheelchair free of charge, and the assessor said this to the patient: now that you have mobility, make something of your life. And that young man took it to heart and decided that he would follow up on a dream that he had to learn English and teach English. And so by way of YouTube, he became fluent in English. And when he received his wheelchair, he was able to move into his village, into the center of his village with his mother, and create a school where he earns 15 cents a day from each of his students, and thereby is able to support himself and his mother. When we met him, he was full of joy, and it shows on that photograph, if you remember. It is truly the success story of wheelchair provisioning when life becomes productive and joyful for the recipients. And we were glad to get to see that. In fact, we see that a lot.
Thank you for sharing the inspiring story, Wendy. So we have another 2 questions from the audience to Gary's. What would you estimate the average annual cost of maintenance, the standard wheelchair maintenance? And for those who are unable to afford the wheelchair models that they need, what suggestion would you make?
The last question again?
Any suggestions of which type of wheelchair if they have maintenance shortage in fundings? If they're unable to afford, specialized or customized wheelchair. Any suggestions?
Well, we know that Malaysia, fortunately, is progressive as a country in helping the poor and needy. And we're thankful for that because we don't see that in some of the other countries where we serve. So when it comes to customization of a wheelchair, either that means proper support, as Wendy mentioned, tilt in space. It depends if it's an environmental challenge, if it's a physical challenge of, say, spinal alignment. Those challenges are best probably to go to like UMMC that has the capacity to do modifications in-house. IMU can provide a wonderful resource for that because they have the rehabilitative services and the knowledge like Hannes here to help assess and direct them to other resources where necessary.
However, I would also say that the wheelchairs provided through LDSC are extremely adaptable, and in most cases they do an excellent job. We are not able to invest funds in electric wheelchairs, for instance. We would be able to serve less people if we offered electric wheelchairs because the funds would only go so far. And there are a number of sources, I can't say them by name, I don't have them memorized, but there are sources throughout the world where wheelchairs can be accessed at a sliding scale of payment. And so it takes a little bit of research and work. And that's where people like the universities can be so valuable in pointing needy patients to the best resource.
And then part of your question was cost of repairs.
Yeah.
Care center costs are really a function of available and inventory. Like a goods cushion can be less than $20 US, and that's a good form supportive cushion. Cushions need to be replaced almost on an annual basis, but that doesn't mean the wheelchair isn't properly functioning. Or a caster wheel can break. That's a front small caster wheel. Those bearings go after a few years, need to be replaced. What it makes us sad is when we go back 2 to 3 years later and one small part was broken and they put the chair aside and they're no longer functioning and using it. That's because of a lack of knowledge of resources. And that's why we're so thankful for like IMU and UMMC, that they provide resource ability for anyone to come in and find out, how do I fix this problem? What's the solution to a problem versus putting a wheelchair aside because of one small part breaks. Things break, just like brakes on cars go out, but we don't park our cars when the brakes go out. We get them fixed. Wheelchairs are easily fixed and often from local bicycle stores.
Thank you, Greg. So the last question to Prof. Harshad. From your experience, have you seen pharmacists being involved in assisting patients in choosing wheelchairs, or how a pharmacist be involved in helping to prescribe?
Okay, the pharmacist can play a role in certain conditions, but not for selecting the wheelchair. What their role can they play? There is a common condition, cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy, when it's very common condition, and the children, they are using the wheelchair. If they are so spastic that it is even for them too difficult to sit because they got a jerk and severe spasm, so pharmacists can play a role here with the help of course pediatrician and pharmacists to prescribe a suitable muscle relaxant so patient at least can able to sit on the wheelchair. But that pharmacist can play there as a muscle relaxant.
Thank you, Prof. Harshad. So we thank all the panelists and audience for tuning in our very first IMU Cares by Mina series. We hope that you had a meaningful and wonderful sessions. This session will end with a short video clip on the work that we are collaborating on. And there will be a short poll at the end of the video, and we appreciate your feedbacks regarding today's sessions. So see you on our next IMU Cares webinar series. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Assessment, we've been trained by the LDSC partner in 3-day basic wheelchair training that follow the WHO guideline.
Pertamanya, dia lebih berat. Saya boleh buat push up dengan lebih lega hati. Keduanya, roda kicik depannya kalis air. Saya tidak perlu bimbang, roda akan selalu rosak dan perlu diperbaiki sebab kosnya mahal. Saya sendiri dapat cuci kaki tanpa perlu bantuan daripada ayah lagi. Ketinggian tempat letak kaki boleh di-adjust. Ini merupakan kali pertamanya kaki saya yang pendek ada tempat letaknya.
Thank you to IMU Cares
for sponsoring my wheelchair.
Thank you.
Terima kasih
Thank you.